You're good to go.
Awesome. I'm not that short. Awesome. All right. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Thanks for sticking around. I hope you're having a great time at the conference so far. And I hope the next 90 minutes are going to be also very insightful and fun for you. We'll be talking about Power Platform governance using the Power Platform Center of Excellence, or CoE in short. Microsoft likes to have really long names for things that, so it becomes a bit of a tongue twister. A bit about myself. My name is Haniel Croitoru. I'm an associate director working for Protiviti in Canada. I'm also the global Power Platform lead for the company. And I'm an enterprise architect working pretty much in the entire Microsoft stack, obviously with a focus on the Power Platform, but also SharePoint, Microsoft Teams, and other types of workloads. 5 times Microsoft MVP in the business application space. And also I have a lot of interest in just generally speaking, giving back to the community, and trying to really solve problems as much as I can. And a couple of years ago also, I put out a book specifically around Agile in Office 365. So if you're a project manager and you want to roll out Office 365, or if you're in Office 365 and you want to figure out how to use it for your project, why don't you check out that book? Anyways, enough about me. So what are we going to talk about for the next 90 or so minutes? We'll start about a quick overview of what is the Power Platform. I understand many of you may already be using it, but I find in some of these sessions, you get people coming in and they're brand new to it, or there may be somebody who's managing governance for a company, but they don't actually know exactly what the Power Platform is. So we'll talk a bit about what the different components are. And then we'll briefly talk about the importance of governance, right? Like, we talk about all these tools, but why is it important? We'll then go through the Power Platform Center of Excellence. So I'll kind of take you through a number of slides just showing you what the options are. And we'll talk about the roles of, like how you actually use it for different types of roles. And please excuse me, I'm just coming over a cold, so if my voice sounds a bit off, that's the reason why. All right, so the Power Platform is essentially composed of 7 key components. You've got your Power BI for business analytics. You've got your Power Apps for doing your app development, whether it's mobile, desktop, integrated into Teams. Power Automate, which is your workflow workhorse. Power Virtual Agent, which is chatbots. We then have Dataverse, which is a cloud database, AI Builder for more sophisticated analysis of content, and your data connectors, which allow you to essentially reach out and work with different types of data sources. So this one slide is a really high-level overview of what are the key components when people talk about the Power Platform. All right, so Power Apps, there's essentially 3 types. You've got your Canvas app, so think of it as a painter's canvas. You can make it very rich in terms of the user interface, integrate pictures and videos. If it's on a mobile device, you can bring in GPS information and camera information and other types of data. And you really have full control over how it's going to look and how it's going to behave. It can work on mobile, as I said before. You can build apps that are integrated right into Teams. You can build them right on a website, or even have them on their own. So you have a lot of freedom there. Model-driven apps are essentially apps that are based on the data that they represent in Dataverse. So you build a data model, and then you just specify what fields you want them to be, and it just literally creates the views for you. There is flexibility to modify it, and until recently, all you could do is just resize the boxes and decide how many columns you want or how many rows. But what you can do now is using CSS, you can actually customize the mobile model-driven apps a little bit more. Then we have the Power App portals. Think of a Power App portal as a website where the data source is Dataverse. You can have the portal surface data anonymously. So if somebody's just browsing the web and they come to, let's say that it's for your company and you want to have some marketing materials for your company, those are what are called anonymized access. Nobody has to log in or anything like that. And then you've got the authenticated part of it. So once you log in, you can then start surfacing data from your Dataverse. So those are the three different flavors of Power Apps. Then we have Power Automate. That also has a few different flavors. So we have Power Automate Flows, Cloud Flows, and Power Automate Desktop. The Cloud Flows is what most of you are probably familiar with when you log on to the Flow service and you start building the kind of workflows that are displayed here. And basically, you chain them together to solve a specific business process. As I said before, this is kind of the workhorse of the platform because it does a lot of the processing for you. You can trigger workflows based on a specific action in a service like SharePoint, OneDrive, Salesforce, whatever it might be. You can make it triggered based on timeline. So you can say every hour, every day, every month. Or you can set it up based on a button click. It could be a physical button. It could be a button inside of a Power App. And you can also have business process flows inside of a model-driven app that can then launch a Power Automate workflow. So that's all for the cloud flows. Now, if you're working with a legacy system, you may be working on a system that's a green screen, there's no APIs, there's no interface, hard to use. In that case, you use Power Automate Desktop. It's essentially an RPA tool, robotic process automation, which really what it means is it mimics the user's interaction. It replaces your need to have your hands on the keyboard on the mouse, and it mimics those tasks step by step as you program them. So if you want to, for example, open up an application, go to a specific screen, read some data, and then copy it somewhere else, you can build a Power Automate Desktop flow to do exactly that. And it can do it fast and in a repetitive manner to then save somebody the manual task of doing that. The RPA bots can be built in an attended mode, which means that they run on your machine under your account, or unattended, which means that they can run behind the scene on a different machine, different server, so that they're not actually taking over a person's machine resources. Then we have Power BI. So this, again, is a rich visualization tool. It really helps you get the meaning behind your data. Just looking at a bunch of numbers is nice, but what does it really mean? So it allows you to match up information from numerous sources and get more sense out of it. What I really like about it, it has natural language understanding. So you can ask it a question like, what was the weather in Toronto in 1940 on April the 2nd? If the data points are available, then Power BI can actually analyze the data and bring you back those results just based on the real English type question that you're asking. Then we have Power Virtual Agents. So as I said before, it's a chatbot. What's really nice about it is there's no code involved. You just give it a bunch of terms that you're trying to ask. You can give it a bunch of responses, and then based on the user's response, then it goes into like a back and forth between the person and the bot. You can also, if you need to do more sophisticated tasks behind the scene, you can actually call Power Automate workflows. So they can then start serving data from different sources and give the user a much richer experience. Also, you can stand up a bot really quickly by just pointing it to a website or a page that has a bunch of questions and answers. It could scan it, read it, and start building that catalog of topics for you. Dataverse, again, it's a cloud-based database, but it's more than just a database. It already has security built in, business logic, business rules, and it uses something called the Common Data Model, which essentially is a consortium of a number of companies like Microsoft and Adobe that sit down together and say, okay, what are some of the most common data entities that are used in the business? Accounts, users, company information, invoice information. So rather than starting from scratch, you have these predefined templates, if you may, that you can start building out your business solutions very, very quickly. And the Dataverse is an inherent piece of the Power Platform because a lot of the data that you're generating that you may not see is in fact stored inside of Dataverse, such as approvals, even the Power Virtual Agents, the data stored inside of the Dataverse. Then we have AI Builder, and that, as I said before, it's another level of sophistication where it can analyze data for you and provide you results rather than having to do it manually. So you can have models to automatically scan an invoice and provide you information about it, scan a business card. You can, for example, teach it to look at this picture like you see on the screen and distinguish between different objects, a green can versus a brown can. It can scan an email and it can tell you what language it's in. It can tell you if the tone of the user, what is the sentiment? Are they happy? Are they sad? Are they frustrated? So a lot of these type of capabilities are available for you at your fingertips using the Power Platform. And then the last one is the connections. And so on the screen, I mentioned 350 connectors. It's probably closer to around 500 today. And this is just more and more companies that are building these connectors for their services, because what they're realizing is the more connectors that are available to be consumed, the better chance that somebody's going to actually use that service rather than using somebody else who has those capabilities. And so you're definitely not limited to Microsoft. It can be anywhere from Salesforce to MailChimp to ServiceNow, you name it. There's a good chance that if it's a more modern solution, that they have an interface for it in a connector inside of the Power Platform. All right. So let's talk about governance, importance of the governance. I did a survey recently on LinkedIn, some of you may have participated, to find out who's managing who's governing the Power Platform for an organization. And I gave a few choices. I said, maybe it's IT. That's usually, the people who own the technology. In some cases, maybe it's business. Maybe they've actually established a specific group of individuals who are managing the platform. And I was a bit surprised when I got the results, and I found that nearly 30% of companies are turning on the Power Platform and just letting people go wild, right? It sounds great, right? I mean, it's a great tool. You can use it for a lot of things, but you got to be really careful, because even with the most basic functionality and no premium licenses and anything, you can actually create solutions that can be disastrous. You can build a simple workflow that you're intending to maybe go and delete a file or forward one email under a certain event, and you make a mistake and it does it en masse, right? So imagine all of your emails being forwarded to somebody outside your company, or all of your files being deleted from a server or from SharePoint, right? So you got to be really careful about how these kind of solutions are being built. And so while it is great from a citizen developer and to adopt and to grow the usage of the Power Platform, you have to put some guardrails on it. You got to be really careful, because what you're trying to do is you're trying to enable your users, but in a controlled manner. And so in other words, governance, really what it is used for is to avoid and mitigate risk as much as possible. Now, when we talk about governance, what are some of the areas we're talking about? So one of them is governing body. Who are the people who are going to be governing the Power Platform for the company? It's going to be different for every company. Some companies, it'll be just IT. Other ones may have people from the security team, maybe the CISO. Others would have, the business involved. So definitely that's something that you want to consider. Another element is licensing. So I gave a session earlier today about Power Platform licensing, right? You don't want to have too much. You don't want to have too little. You want to have just the right amount and just the right type of licenses. Security. Who's got access to data? What kind of data is being used? How is business data and non-business data being mixed together in your apps and your workflows? Those are things you want to think about. Monitoring. How do you know what's happening in your platform? How many apps are there? How many workflows are failing? How many environments are there? Are you over or under capacity? Those are all kind of things that you want to monitor on a regular basis. And then we have alerting. So related to monitoring, which is more passive, somebody having to actually go in and perform an action to view. Alerting is meant to be active. The moment something happens, go and send an alert in some form, whether it's an email, a text message, a Teams message. Maybe there's a third-party alerting system that you're just trying to send a message to so that it can then start tracking that as a ticket. Whatever it might be, you want to make sure you have alerting in place. And then the last one is application lifecycle management. So this is where you want to make sure that you're training your users to build solutions in a proper way from the beginning, which is usually easier than incurring technical debt and then having to go backwards and say, okay, now I'm going to go fix those 500 workflows because none of them are conforming to our standards. So these are all kind of elements of governance that you should be considering when you're managing the Power Platform. So let's start talking about the what is the Power Platform Center of Excellence, or CoE, and then we'll talk about how it can actually help you achieve some of those goals. So the Center of Excellence is essentially, it's a starter kit. It's a starter kit that is put up by Microsoft that you can install in your environment, and it is focused on Power Apps, Power Automate, and Power Virtual Agents. And there's three key components to it: administration, governance, and nature. So the administration of it, you want to be able to monitor what's happening, keep control of what's going on there. Governance, this is where you can kind of put up some red flags and you can block users from doing something or make them go through a certain process in order to achieve what it is that they're trying to do. And then the third one is nurture. And so what you want to do, again, this is what, like I said, with the application lifecycle management, you want to train your users early on, give them information, give them the tools that they need in order to build something the right way from the beginning. So training materials, training sessions, templates, all those type of things fall under the nurturing. Additional pieces that come with the Center of Excellence, there's an innovation backlog, which allows you to basically users to submit ideas for additional apps that they would like to have built or workflows. ALM accelerator, where it allows you to apply source code strategies for GitHub. So if you think about organizations who do development and they've got source code and they're using something like either GitHub or Azure DevOps, same idea, but more geared for the Power Platform. And then theming, which is more around the branding of the CoE with some themes, some different language, the emails that go out, you might want to have them in a certain way. So that's all the add-ons to it. Now, really important, the CoE is a starter kit, and you'll see it mentioned as a starter kit. And the intention of it is that, I mean, you can't just take it and install it and use it as it is. But really, the thought from Microsoft was that here's what we most commonly heard from our clients. Doesn't mean that we've included everything. What we've done is we've included the key points that are common, but then we are enabling our clients to go in and modify the solution as it is. So you can add additional capabilities, templates, other type of things. The only thing you want to keep in mind is that every month Microsoft releases another version. And so when you do your changes, ideally you should have a CoE in your development environment and one in production. Keep track of those changes, because once you are deploying a new version of the CoE, you'd have to back up those changes, implement the new version, and then put your new changes on top of that. That's just how the solutions are working in the Power Platform today. Okay. Now, as I said before, governance is important. So the CoE will provide you great dashboards and reports and visualizations and functionality, but it is not your governance. You don't have a governance by using the Power Platform CoE. It is a tool. You got to make sure that you've established your processes, your committees, all of those things, and you are leveraging the CoE to help you with the governance. Okay, I want to make that very clear, because some people say, yeah, of course we're governing. We've installed the CoE, right? So what else is there to do? Well, no. Right? Who's monitoring the CoE? What happens if there's an issue? Who decides what feature gets turned on and off? If there's a new connector, who decides if you're going to use it or not? Does it go into business? Does it go into non-business? Is it blocked, right? There's all these different things you want to think about. So make sure that you're not just replacing governance with the tool, because they're not one and the same. To set up, to set up the CoE, so there's a link you can go to download. It's a package on GitHub. I've also added some links, and there's more links at the end of my presentation on instructions step-by-step on how to set it up. If it's the first time that you're doing it, it'll probably take a couple of hours, and then it'll probably run overnight to start collecting information. And then once the data is there, you can essentially start using it. So generally speaking, the core piece of it, the administration part and part of the governance, is in Dataverse. So there's all these workflows that are running on a scheduled basis, and they start collecting information about the environments and the workflows and the Power Virtual Agents and all of your environments, your licenses, your users, like all of that data, there's a ton of it. It gets collected on a nightly basis and it gets stored inside of the Dataverse. And that's how then you start getting your dashboards and all of the information. Now, the deployment of the CoE can be done in one of two ways. You can either install it inside of a team, or you can install it in a production environment. If you install it in a team, and the functionality is almost the same, but there's some critical differences between them. In the team, you have some data capacity limitations, which is 2 gigabytes. The users will be limited to users of that team, so anybody outside of the team will not be able to access it. You will not be able to get any out-of-log telemetry. And the reason for that is when you're building a Dataverse for Teams solution, you can't start talking to external services. That is blocked by Microsoft. So you can only work with whatever workflows the Dataverse for Teams can use. Yeah, so all the apps, everything is accessible within the team. Don't have the lifecycle management, and sharing is also only limited to those individuals. And you're also limited to only 1 million records inside of your Dataverse. If you're setting it up outside on its own, you're going to set up a separate production environment. Then you have essentially unlimited capacity. By unlimited, I mean as much as you have in your tenant, but you can always increase it. You can invite as many users as you want. You can get into very granular permissions. You can run from any browser. It runs in mobile-driven apps rather than Canvas apps. So those are the key distinguishers. Now, the only thing you got to consider is that in the production environment, users who are going to be interacting with it need premium Power App per user or Power App per app licenses, versus in Teams where you don't need that. You're leveraging the team. In both cases, you do need to have at least one Power Automate per flow license, because there's some flows that are running that need that advanced license. All right. Now, the functionality is, as I said before, you have kind of the 3 categories. You have administration, governance, and nurturing. And they are broken out to help 3 groups of users. You've got your administrators. Those are your governance team who are managing the platform. You have your makers. Those are the individuals who are building the solutions for the organization. And then you have everybody else, people who may want to become makers, or people who want to be aware of what's happening. Okay. I'm going to quickly stop here to see if there's any questions so far. No questions? Okay. So let's get through, start looking at the admin ones. So the first thing that you're going to see when you go to the Center of Excellence, there's a Power BI dashboard. It is very rich. It gives you a lot of information about just about everything in the environment. As I said, you have information on your flows and your apps, your desktop flows, your virtual agents, your data storage, your licenses, the users who are your main users. All of that information is all being captured and stored in Dataverse. If there's questions, I don't mind actually being interrupted and asking me. It's just I see messages, but I can't read it. So was there a question? Moderator? No. Okay, I'm gonna open it up here. So how does the CoE guides you to create policies? So it doesn't actually guide you to create the policies. What it does is when you have the policies, you can use a CoE in order to get the answers and to get the questions. However, when you do have policies in place, you can enforce them using the CoE, and you'll see that in a little bit. Let's go back to the presentation. So another one is the admin view, and this is where you can go into, this is a model-driven app, and you can go and you can view details about your apps, your flows, a lot of that information, as I mentioned before. but it also allows you to view more details about apps. Have they been approved or not? Get more details about them. But again, it's a matter of getting the big picture and then being able to drill down rather than having to go to multiple places. Are there areas in the CoE or data reports provided by the CoE that would be helpful in a security IAM team? So yes, there is information, particularly around data loss prevention, where you can look at what policies are in place. Jumping ahead a little bit, but I'll answer it now. So you can have with the connectors what are called business connectors and non-business and blocked ones. With business and non-business, you can set up what are called DLP policies, and you can say that I'm not going to allow to mix the business with the non-business. If any workflow tries to do it, the workflow is automatically suspended. If an app tries to do it, when you try to publish the app, it's not going to let you publish it. It's going to give you an error. And so you can actually, through the Center of Excellence, you can monitor the DLP policies, and you can also look at what if scenarios. You can want to say, if I were to block the Salesforce connector, am I going to break anything from a security standpoint? Or any workflow is going to break, or is any functionality going to stop working? So those are some of the things that you can do. Not sure if that answered your question, Eric. The command center. So this is a bit of a launchpad where you can go into specific functionality to look at any sort of messages that come from blogs or from the message center to see any updates, right? So rather than having to navigate to all these different websites, you go to one place, you get all this information. Learning path. So for those of you who've done any Microsoft training, it gives you information about that piece. And then just the core CoE team. This is just a way to communicate. And as you can see, you have things like the dashboard I talked about before, the Power Platform menu. So all these pieces kind of feed into each other. All right, environment request management. So today in an organization, if somebody wants to get an environment, most likely they have to go and so first of all, if an organization did not turn it off by default, anybody can go and do it. Anybody can create environments. And what you'll find is all of a sudden somebody's going to complain that they can't create it. And when you start to look at it, you realize that you're out of capacity. By default, you get 10 gigabytes of capacity to tenant. Every environment uses up 1 gigabyte of capacity if it uses a Dataverse database. So before you know it, you may be out of capacity, and you may say, well, I never created one. Who created all these environments? And then you start looking at it and you realize that it's a bit of a dog's breakfast. Plus, you can start potentially sharing the environments with different people. And so again, you want to put some guardrails on it. And so by disabling the ability for users to just go and create their own environments, now you have to put a process in place. So you're asking about how can the support process, you're limiting the ability from the end users. So now they have to either open up a ticket or perform a certain task in order to get an environment. So what the Power Platform, the CoE allows you to do is it actually has a form that users can go to, and they can fill out the form, provide all the justification and all the information that they need. And that can go through, not just go through the approval process, but also once it's approved, it will automatically provision the environment for the users. So you're removing the responsibility from the IT team. DLP Editor. So I just kind of talked about that a couple of minutes ago. This is where you can look at the existing policies, and then you can see if you were to lock down certain things, how is that going to actually impact your existing solutions? So it's a bit of a trial and error, and you can actually also build out the actual policies in the tool. But this is really useful because sometimes people say, oh, my things are broken, or as IT, and I've seen this happen in some companies where they were not using this, and they said, we heard that we have to use DLP policies and that we should lock down our environment to the minimum 23 connectors that are the Microsoft 365. So let's go ahead and do that. And all of a sudden, they're flooded with reports from users saying, hey, all my stuff, mission critical applications are now broken because nobody was considering that. So using the CoE is very helpful in getting those answers. Environment management for teams. So this is similar to the promotion or requesting environments, where you can actually request a new team or Dataverse for team instance, give the justification, go through the whole process, do the provisioning, all of that. But rather than just doing it on its own, it's all with the proper approval. All the information is tracked and then stored back in Dataverse. So later on, we're going to look at it and say, hey, who approved that? Oh, yes, it was John. I can see when he approved it. It's in the system. So that's where you can benefit from that. And then you can also customize your messages. It says, you create a new team, a new environment, send out the messages, give the users information, right? So it's more engaging than just getting in a notes or not even getting anything, and just all of a sudden you see there's a new team or something new in your Microsoft Teams. So it's more engaging in that way. All right, let's talk about the makers now. So the makers are the individuals who create solutions or create apps and flows, etc. The typical process is you start with a system, you have the compliance detail request, which basically says that there's a workflow. It's going to go through and check all the different apps and all the different workflows and go through and say, are any of them non-compliant? And there may be certain rules that define something as being compliant or non-compliant. And so the workflow is going to run. And if it finds something that's not compliant, it's going to send an email to the owner. Again, the email is something that can be customized to your specific needs. They can look at what the message says. You could even go as far as to customize the message to tell the user specifically what is not compliant, as opposed to just telling them this workflow or this app is not compliant. Give them more details. Then you have the development compliance center for the app. So that's where they can go in and they can look at all the apps that are approved. They can get information about ones that are not approved, justification status, and all of that. Next one we have is the Power Platform admin view. So this is where an admin can go in and somebody in the governance team, and they can actually see the status. And it's kind of hard to read here, but there's like a business process flow progression bar. And you can see step by step, and you can say, has justification been provided? If not, then maybe you don't want to enable that app yet for others. So remind the user, hey, or the maker, you have to give me a justification. If the justification looks good, then it can go and enable the app for others. And then once all that's done, then it can go to the last step, which is the app catalog. And that's an app catalog specific to the company, not the one that's published by Microsoft, where you can see a listing of all the apps that are available. And because sometimes, and I've seen this often happen, is companies will build 5 times the same thing because one department built something, they don't know that somebody else has built the same thing already. So this is a nice way of avoiding that. So let's look at those ones in a little bit more detail. So the Developer Compliance Center, this is where you can go in and you can find out about the app maker can go in. They can find out about the compliance if there's any issues or not. So you can see it kind of gives you like a little indicator, yellow, red, to show you how bad it is. The user can then go in, look at the details, and then respond accordingly. If they need to change something, provide justification, whatever it may be. Then we have the request flow governance, compliance request flow. So this is, again, it's a workflow that runs, and it lets users know that they need to provide justification. And you can, again, set up the parameters of when justification is needed. So as an example, if I build a flow for myself, then it's fine. It may never notify me. It's not going to ask me anything. It's what is called personal productivity. But if I now start to build a flow in a different environment, I start sharing with a lot of users, or even a default environment that I share with a lot of users, or it may be very complex, or there may be other parameters you can set up. This workflow may say, whoa, hold on a second. This is now this has surpassed the threshold of what is called personal productivity. Now we need to have justification. Why are you sharing it with so many people? Why is it so complex? Who's in control of it? Who's going to be supporting it? All these questions you can ask for it and track that information as part of a justification. Then we have business process flow for auditing. So this is what I mentioned before. It was hard to read, but this is where the admin can actually look at the flows, or sorry, they can look at the apps and the flows inside of the solution, look at the justification provided, but they can also assess the risk. They can look at a whole bunch of parameters that are being captured through workflows for every single workflow, for every single app. And based on that, they can decide, what should we do? Do we need to change something? Do we need to disable it? Do we need to apply maybe a different DLP policy? Do we need to limit the number of users who are going to be using it, or which users are going to be using it? So that allows the users, the admins, to have kind of a more detailed look at it. And then also they can decide, should it go into the catalog or not? And then again, you can get the approvals when they go out to make sure that basically the right approvals are granted, to share the applications, or limit it to specific users. And again, it's just a matter of tidying up, because what you don't want is just create all these flows and people say, okay, I'm not going to use it, and just leave it behind there. So there has to be a cleanup process in the back end. Archiving. So hard to read, but I'm going to basically read to you the high level. So on the left side, we have apps. On the right side, we have flows. And so basically what happens, there's a weekly workflow that's going to be running, and it's checking to see if there's any apps that have not been accessed in the last 6 months or have been modified in the last 6 months. If it finds that there are some, it sends it basically sends a notification, and then the user has to decide, do they want to keep them alive or not? And then if they say retain, if they want to retain them, then they are backed up because they're not being used, but they want to keep them. Otherwise, they may have to say, well, are they still active? And if they say yes, then they just have to approve that they're active. And then for the flows, it's a similar scenario where every week there's going to be a workflow that's going to go through, check for any flows that have been modified or executed. If it finds them, do you want to keep them alive, or if they're not being actively used, do you want to archive them for further use, or if not, then they basically disappear. Reassigning orphaned objects. So what can happen, and here's a scenario for you. You have a user, and he or she, they create an application. Application works really well. They start sharing it as users with other individuals, not as owners, but just as users. And they, it becomes, again, one of those critical items. And one day that individual leaves the company. And then IT does what they do is they, back up all the information for that user, and then they disable the account or they delete the account. So what happens now is that workflow or that app has become orphaned. It does not have an owner at all. And things start to break. You cannot run an app without an owner. You cannot run a workflow without an owner. So if some of those things are mission critical, things are going to go sour really, really fast. What the Center of Excellence allows you to do is there actually is a view that you can go, or an app you can go into, and it will show you all the different workflows that are orphaned. And then what you can do is inside the app, you can say, okay, I want to actually go and select one, and I want to assign one by one or multiple, and assign them to another user. Maker assessment. So this is where somebody builds an app, and they want to, based on certain criteria, they want to determine if they're in compliance or not. So what they would be doing is they would be filling out a questionnaire, and then there's going to be an assessment that's going to come back and say, okay, based on the questions or based on the answer you've provided, yes, you are compliant, or no, you're not compliant with the, with the solution. Forward to getting set up, we had a few items caused. Yeah, okay, so yeah, so people are actually experiencing that. I don't want to say I'm happy to hear that. I'm actually not happy to hear that, but I'm glad that you're finding this to be useful, so that's good. Welcome email. So this is now going into the nurturing. So when somebody is building an app, so remember, those workflows run on a nightly basis and they analyze something. They analyze everything in the environment. So they keep a list of all the users who have at least one workflow or one app. They keep a list of that. And then let's say that somebody goes and builds an app for the first time. Congratulations, well done. The next time that the app's going to go around, it's going to say, hey, somebody new, let's welcome them. And so it sends them a standard welcome message, which again, you can customize, or you can provide them information about any sort of training you might be offering, any interesting documentation, maybe some best practices, some standards, who to reach out to if they have any questions, right? So it's nice in a sense that people don't feel that they're completely out in the cold and they're just creating stuff, but there's actually a community within the company that's supporting them. And then similar to the admin command center, there's a maker command center that gives you quick access to some of these tools, but obviously for less of these tools as for the admin. All right, next section we have is around the everyone. So some applications that are available to everyone. So the innovation backlog. So this is something I mentioned in the beginning, is it's an app that the user can go in and submit ideas for an app or a workflow or a bot or anything that they think could be built. They want to get interests. And similar to, there's a bit of gamification that has been added here where you look at, for example, the number of likes, some pain points that it's addressing, complexity. All this information is taken into consideration. And so when your governance body is reviewing these innovation ideas, they can look at this information and say, okay, what's really in demand? Oh, look at this one. This is getting a lot of likes. This one is really one that we should be watching out for. Okay, maybe we should be looking at implementing that for the company. So those are things that the innovation block can help with. Other companies are using different, obviously different systems out there. There's a ton of them, but that's just something that is available to you as part of the Center of Excellence. App catalog is basically a catalog of apps that were built for the organization. So if you remember before, I said that when people building apps, they're getting captured, they go into the Dataverse, but they're not approved yet. Once the justification has been provided and has been approved, and they get published, then users can actually go into the app catalog for the company, and they can see, hey, here's everything that's available. Cool. Here's something I want to use. Get access, request access or start using it. That's what the app catalog does. Similarly, there is a template catalog. And so if you wanted to start building a new flow or a new app or some other things, you can actually have a template catalog where you can go download information and use that as a starting point rather than starting from scratch. So again, just a way to save you time, create more consistency, conform to the policies and the practices that are being put in place. And then finally, we have the training in a day management. And so this is if your company wants to offer a little course, then you can put together the training material or the courses. And this is a platform for doing the registrations where users can then sign up for the different courses, get more information, learn about it more, and then start building more solutions around it. I know I'm a little bit short, not short on time, but actually the presentation was a lot shorter than what I was hoping to do in an hour and a half. So what I'm actually going to do now is I'm going to open it up for questions. And if there's anybody who's looking to roll out the Center of Excellence, has any questions or anything, let me know. I'll open it up now. No questions? How long does it take to get set up? So you're looking probably about a couple of hours. Once you download it, you need to set up a couple of Azure AD apps. You need to then create a bunch of connectors. And then once you have those pieces, you need to create, you need to just get a few pieces of information from your tenant. And after you've done that, you just basically install, there's 4 or 5 different solutions you need to actually install. So you install the core, get that going. Once that's installed, then you can install the nurture package, the solution, the innovation solution, the ALM solution. So you install them one after another. So you're probably looking at a couple of hours from start to finish. I have a tip. Don't follow direction in the Microsoft Service Hub. Instead, use the link. Oh, all right. Okay, thank you. Good call out. Any other questions? Feel free to go off mute if you want to just talk. It's easier. Out of curiosity, is anybody here using the Center of Excellence today? Of the people on the call? Nobody? Okay, so one. Couple of to-dos list, okay. Kirk, feel free to reach out afterwards if there's any questions. Brad, how are you liking it? You find it useful?
Hi, I find it very useful. It really kind of helps up just have that window into what's going on in the environment to be able to kind of keep tabs on the governance. I guess what I'm looking for more at this point is just being able to tie some automation tasks around the governance and like requests for environments and stuff to be able to provision those things a little bit easier.
Right. Have you looked at the environment request form that's in the solution?
I haven't looked at that yet. No.
Okay. So the only thing to keep in mind, it's a bit of a double-edged sword. It really depends on the kind of licensing that's available to your users, because all these solutions, if you want your users to use it, they have to have premium licenses, because it's a model-driven app inside of a solution. So that's what I'm saying is double. Like if your users are already using Power Platform and they're licensed, that's awesome. Then they can use the CoE. But if they're not, then automating the provisioning is something that may not be possible for them, not through the Power Platform without licenses.
Right. Thank you. And we use ServiceNows for our request process, and so I think it needs to be kind of tied into kind of that process as well.
Right. Yeah. So and that's actually what some of my clients do is they use ServiceNow. A user submits a ticket, and then somebody who's IT or help desk, they take the information and then they use the CoE component and they just literally just copy it in, and then they run the submission, and that allows them to then provision it.
Okay.
That's a good idea. Thanks.
Yeah.
My other question was the Microsoft Teams, the baby Dataverses that are Teams, those are all automatically provisioned when someone goes into Teams and starts messing around with
Yeah.
Power Apps. So what is it like? Like, what's the big difference there if someone sets this up inside of Teams if they don't have that kind of broader licensing available in their organization? Like, can you talk a little bit more about that difference?
Yeah, so when you're installing the Center of Excellence in a team, then your world is the team. You're limited by, so for example, accessing the data, you have to be in the team in order to see what to see the CoE dashboards. You can't be outside of it. You must be a team member. So that's one thing. Also, the CoE uses a custom connector and uses some external connections that you cannot leverage inside of Teams, because when you're building Dataverse solutions inside of a team, your workflows can't reach outside of the team. You can only use whatever connectors are available for within the team, within that realm. So that's why the auditing is not available, the ALM is not available.
Right. Right. So it's
functionality-
really, really limited then. So
Well, it's not that limited. I mean, you still
No?
can see, you can still see all the apps and the workflows and other information, but you don't have the breadth of data of like, for example, the number of rows, as I said before, like the number of storage, your storage is reduced. And then if you want to share it with, let's say, everybody in the organization, then you just have to create a public team, basically, to share that information with. So I wouldn't say that it's extremely limited, but there are some limitations.
since the licenses are so expensive, I imagine there's a fair amount of organizations that would choose then to go with that. Or would you think that they would go with buying one license for an admin account for both Power Apps and Power Automate, and then setting it up, the Center of Excellence, with that admin account, and then having the understanding that their users would still be using it inside of Teams for the most part? That could work too.
So 2 points about that.
Mm-hmm.
There's actually a session I gave earlier today about specifically about licensing. The first one about the licenses being expensive. I mean, yes, they cost money, but think about the amount of time an individual or a number of individuals would be spending doing something manually, right? Let's just take one example, the orphaned workflows, okay? That's a critical pain point for a lot of organizations. Now imagine that you can't do it without a premium license. The premium license is going to cost you, if you just go with Power Automate per flow, let's say it costs you even $5 a month, or the most expensive, $20 a month. How much time would somebody be spending if you've got a few hundred workflows and you need to go one by one on a regular basis and review to see if there's an owner? How much time would you be spending on that? You say hours, right? Now, is $20 per month worth it over a task to be spending a lot more? Because many people's salary is more than $20 an hour.
Right, right. And so having like maybe a couple of admins who have the full licenses,
Yes.
and having the bulk of their users using the team space, since the bulk of their users aren't that sophisticated anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say that it's definitely a mix. I don't think a lot of organizations are just going to say, we're just going to give everybody Power Automate per user and Power Apps per user license with unlimited AI, builder credits and unlimited. No, like that's, unless you've got really deep pockets and nothing to do with the money, then nobody's going to do that. But a couple of things there to keep in mind. First of all, if you do have a lot of licenses, speak to your Microsoft rep, because I know companies are getting really big discounts just by committing to be using the Power Platform for the next while for a lot of users. So I've seen volume discounts sometimes of even 50% or more. Also, to your point, right? Not everybody uses the same thing. So you can start in baby steps. So if you're using only one app, get your Power App per app license. Start using it. Works well, great. You buy 2, you buy 3, you buy 4. After 4, guess what? Doesn't make sense anymore. Move to the Power App per user license. But at least now you don't have to worry about, oh, you know, can I afford to build another app? Well, it's saving you so much time. Don't think about it. Like the $20 a month is not going to break you, the company, right? If they think about how much time it's going to save you from doing some manual tasks. Think about it that way. The other thing is also, there's a concept called multiplexing. And basically multiplexing, what it means is that you are using either hardware or software to pool licenses, or you're building a solution that circumvents the user's intention, okay? So to give you a simple example, and again, this is something I see a lot. People use SharePoint. Why? Because it's free. Like you build apps and you build workflows in SharePoint. There's free standard connectors, so no extra charge. But what they really want to do is they want to store data in SQL, or like you said before, maybe they want to issue a ticket to ServiceNow. Let's take your example, right? Creating an environment, or somebody else had that example before. So what can I do? Easy. I'm going to write a Power App to submit the data into a SharePoint list, and then I'm going to build a workflow that's going to listen to my SharePoint list, and it's going to say, hey, when a new item is added, get the data and go and submit it to ServiceNow. Easy, right? Simple. Well, okay, you need to get a license, a Power Automate per user license for that additional account, because ServiceNow is a premium account. Well, you got 2 problems there. First problem, a service account cannot use a user account. It cannot be Power App per user. It cannot even be Power Automate per user. If it's a service account that's running workflows for the company, then Microsoft says it must be using the Power Automate per flow account, for which you have to buy at least 5, and they cost $100 a month. Okay, so that's one issue. The second issue is that by building a Power App that writes to a SharePoint list, that then calls a second workflow, that then talks to ServiceNow, the ultimate intention, and there's automation from start to finish for the user to interface with ServiceNow. Therefore, the user themselves, even if they're not talking to ServiceNow, must be licensed with a Power Apps per app or Power App per user license. Okay. In the example we gave before, the chain of automation has been broken, where the user goes to ServiceNow, they type in the information in ServiceNow, and then the IT person looks on the ServiceNow application and either manually copies or manually types in the data into a Power App that then goes and creates the environment request. But that IT person has to be licensed with a Power Apps per app or Power Apps per user license. Hope I didn't confuse everybody here.
No.
So yeah, licensing is something you have to consider very carefully. It's easy to build solutions to circumvent licensing. Microsoft never intended to build roadblocks. Microsoft just has a language in their contract that says multiplexing is not allowed, and they have clear definitions of what multiplexing is. Sorry to put a damper on things.
You reference orphaned environments, or where there are no owners on. How do you deal with that?
No, I was talking more about orphaned workflows and orphaned apps.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it can even be orphaned environments. I mean, to be honest, it can be the same thing. So you look at your environments, you look at your list of owners. If you find that there's no owners, you can assign them to somebody else. You can make somebody else an owner.
Just reassign. Okay.
Yeah.
And then when it comes to making policies, the tenant versus environmental policies. How do you drive that without having too much management to do in terms of what's at the top level, tenant level, versus the environmental level and business versus non-business?
Oh, you're talking about DLP policies. So
Yeah.
You want to create, I mean, you definitely should have at least one basic policy in place, and you can actually stack them. So you can have multiple policies that would apply to a certain environment. It doesn't have to be, so yeah, the DLP policies go for an environment. They don't have to be mutually exclusive. So what you can do is you can build DLP policies that you can put together. You just have to be really careful, because sometimes you can have two policies that will conflict with each other. And if you're not careful, you may find you get into a situation where one says SharePoint and Facebook is allowed, another one will say SharePoint and Facebook is not allowed. And I think it takes the most restrictive of them. And so you may over restrict some of your solutions. But think about, rather than about the policy, think about the business scenario. So something like an external facing business unit, like sales, like marketing, they may have to have access to certain social media connectors, right? They want to collect the number of hits on LinkedIn advertisements. They want to post a message on Twitter. They want to, promote themselves. So they may want to have access to the non-business connectors as part of their solutions. But somebody internal should not, because you don't want people to start sending data, onto social media. So you just have to carefully think about how you're crafting them, but be careful just when you have multiple policies together that they're not conflicting with each other.
So in a case like that, where social media, for example, you would put the social media policy as an environmental variable for just that particular environment versus at the tenant level. So you would still block it at a tenant level, but exclude it for a particular, like the environment for marketing.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't do anything at the tenant level. So, and I'm not sure what you mean by tenant level, but you have the by default, you're not just applying it a blank. So the default environment, I typically like to remove all the connectors except for the minimum 23. So there's like SharePoint, OneDrive, Outlook, Approval, Office 365. There's Kaizala, Yammer, all the ones that come with Microsoft 365. And there's a reason that you can't even remove them, because some of them are inherently, the systems are depending on them. So anybody on the call who's a SharePoint user, if you ever have done an approval in SharePoint where you select the file and it says request approval, that's actually using Power Automate. So if you were to remove the approval connector from your environment, guess what you've done? You've broken your SharePoint. So that's why there's 23 that you must keep. So I would create a DLP policy for the 23 for personal productivity, leave those ones in the default environment. That would limit the scope of the damage that a user could do by mistake or on purpose. But then I would create other DLP policies for other specific uses. So for example, when I said marketing, so I would actually create maybe a marketing policy. And so any environment that is assigned to marketing, I would assign the marketing policy, which says, okay, I'm allowing LinkedIn and some of the other social media connectors to be mixed with business.
But if the org does not allow social media, you would not create a tenant policy that blocks social media, and then.
Yeah, you can. I mean, you can by default. So again, when you're saying that everything is in an environment, right? So all of your Power Platform work happens in an environment. The default, when you just first time you go into Flow into Power Automate, you're going into an environment. The default is an environment. So
but
you
all environments falls under your tenant, right? At that higher level.
Right, but by default, there's no DLP policies involved.
Right. Yeah.
But
no, I understand.
Yeah, so you can create a policy that says only allow, let's say, allow the 23 connectors, block everything else, and assign that policy to the default environment. So it's not tenant level, it's that environment is now only has access to the 23 connectors.
Got you.
And then you create another environment, is like, okay, now this environment, what DLP policies do I give it? So yeah, the default, you can do default, I think I know what you mean. Like if you don't assign any policies, what's going to happen? Right?
No, I want to assign a policy that would apply to any environments that are created. So that's why I'm saying at the tenant level
So
versus a policy at the environment level.
Yes. So yeah, you can create a deal. Sorry, I misunderstood your question. So yes, you can create a DLP policy and you can say assign it to all environments. You can do that. But then if you create additional policies, you just got to be careful that the policies will not conflict.
Don't conflict each other. Yeah.
Yeah. So good. Kirk, you made a comment about licensing. Oh, you're looking to roll out the Center of Excellence because of licensing. Yeah, using Power Platform, so we know how best to license our users. Yes. And one thing you'll find is that when you start to assess it, you may start finding all these environments and apps and workflows that people may not be using anymore. There may be duplicates and you want to align them, right? So there may be an opportunity to not just save on license costs, but also clean up your environment, clear up or release some unused capacity that you need. Very good. Any other questions?
Do you have a demo environment at all that you'd like to show? That'd be interesting.
Unfortunately I have environments, but they're all client. I was really hoping to look for one. I asked my client, I did not get a response in time, so I cannot.
Sure.
I can show it.
Understood.
Yeah, so unfortunately that's why I was kind of biting my fingers today, like please say yes, and I didn't hear back from them in time. So I'm hoping next time I'm going to do the presentation that I will be able to do more of a live show. The challenge with demo environments is, and I actually had one, unless you have data, like workflows and apps and people using it and things failing and all of that, I don't want to say it's meaningless, but you're going to see a bunch of nothing. You see a lot of empty reports, like, oh, look, the little blip, like there's one workflow running, right?
That makes total sense. Yeah.
Sorry?
That makes complete sense. I'm understanding you. It's that's completely logical. I just didn't think it through. So yeah, I hear you.
Yeah. So, but I mean, I'll talk to Microsoft. Maybe there's something that they can help put together because they have a lot of demo tenants. I just don't know if they have a demo tenant for the Power Platform to do that. That would be very, very helpful in demonstrations. So. Well, I put back my contact info again. Feel free to connect with me, ask any questions, reach out. Always happy to continue conversations. Those of you on the call who either have rolled out, are rolling out, or are thinking about rolling out the Center of Excellence, good luck. Feel free to ping me if you have any questions, if there's any way I can help.
Thank you.
Okay. Max, do you want to bring back maybe the survey?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So I'm just going to bring up the survey slide again, everybody. Just one moment. Maybe PowerPoint Live might be failing me here. Well, I'll put the link in the chat for you all. That's probably even easier. MN365.org. survey. We'd really appreciate if you fill that out. And some of the other sessions might still be going on, but feel free to check those out. We really appreciate you joining us. If you're interested in joining for our future user groups, you can go to mn365.org as well and sign up. I believe we have some of our future ones already posted. We'd love to see you there. It's deep dive topics like you saw today, but even a little bit more time spent on them. And thank you all for joining the Admin Day. Hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, afternoon, evening, morning, whatever it is. Thank you, Haniel, for your presentation, and everybody, nice to see you. Thank you.